Hello, folks. This is Buzz Patterson, and welcome to Your Voices, Power and Patriots. A lot to talk about tonight. I'm so thrilled to be joined by my two brilliant co-hosts, Bree A, former Navy officer, and Matt Dooley, retired retired Army Colonel. I'm the Air Force guy, retired Air Force Colonel. Welcome to Power and Patriots. So this week, lots to talk about. The noose is tightening on James Comey and Peter Strzock. In fact, this coming Wednesday in Congress, Peter Strzock will be asked to testify. It'll be a closed hearing, so we'll hopefully hear what goes down this coming Wednesday, but we'll stay tuned for that as the noose is tightening. Also, we found out this past week with the DOJ's IG report, Michael Horowitz on the Hill, that they are now looking into James Comey using his emails through a private email account. And at the same time, he was actually investigating Hillary Clinton. You can't make this stuff up, folks. Also, what's going on down at the border? Do the Democrats really care about the kids? I don't think so. I think it's all about November. We'll talk about that. And finally, the liberals are really ratcheting up the rhetoric and the attack on conservatives. Are we in a new civil war? I think we are. But let's talk about this week and what's going to be happening in this next coming week. My two hosts, Bree A, former naval officer, and Matt Dooley, Army retired colonel. So we have the only social media show like it, folks. This is a U.S. military show. We talk about what's happening in national security, what's happening around the world, international relations, what's going on currently in this country that affect our national security. So let's start, Matt, tonight with this coming testimony this week with Peter Strzock and what's happening in the DOJ IG. We found out a couple of new things in terms of the fact that it's not over yet. Michael Horowitz is actually going on now and investigating not only James Comey's emails, his use of emails from a private account, but also the fact they're looking into the Clinton Foundation. So, Matt, what are your expectations this week in terms of what's going to happen with Peter Strzock on the Hill on Wednesday?
Well, Buzz, I think it's really important to understand the difference between an IG report and a prosecutorial recommendation. An IG cannot prefer charges against someone. What an IG does is it completes an investigation and then refers for further criminal investigation, which may then lead to a prosecution. So a lot of what came out of the IG's report was spun by the left to say, look, it's just a nothing burger. What Horowitz laid out was the explanation for bias and the evidence attached to that, and then named individuals who violated process, violated procedures, and then referred each of those for further investigation. Strzock is really at the epicenter of this because clearly what he did with his texts and some of the things he stepped outside on and indicated his own bias warrant further investigation. And that's why he's going before Congress and he's going to have to testify and explain what he meant when he said things that were very clearly anti-Trump. He's also going to explain to Congress what he was doing as part of the investigation team with Hillary Clinton, and then the link taking that exact same investigation team almost and moving it over and beginning an investigation against Donald Trump. The reason why it matters to those of us who are former military or active duty is because it's all about accountability. Those in positions of higher authority and higher responsibility are held to a higher standard. That's what this is about. It isn't a nothing burger. When you've got people who are senior leaders among the Justice Department and the FBI who are stepping outside of what the bounds of normal behavior is to throw an election, to bend justice, then those people need to be held accountable.
And let's remember how this all started, Bree. You know, we started with Hillary Clinton, who was the Secretary of State at the time, who not only was using a private email account to transmit classified information or communicate with classified information, she was using a private server. Now, currently today, as we talk in this during the show, there are millions of both military members and civil servants, U.S. government employees that are doing the right thing and safeguarding their classified information. So to me, it's a huge deal when we talk about the fact that Hillary Clinton, who was the Secretary of State at the time, who was using a personal email account, And we now know also, because of Michael Horwitz's report, that there were 13 people she was communicating with through that unclassified email account, one of them being Barack Obama. So this goes all the way to the top in terms of people who were violating U.S. Code 18 and what we know to be just prudent policy in terms of classified. So, Bree, from the former naval officer standpoint, just explain to our viewers that's how important protected classified information is and why it's essential to us in the functioning of our republic, our democratic republic.
Well, I do have a C story, and I think for some individuals who are out there, they'll probably understand some of these, the C story, some of these details, okay? So when you're at sea and you are doing operations, you are to keep as much of that information on as classified as possible. Why? Because we have people who are out in the middle of the sea looking to cause havoc, individuals who are not our friends, who are trying to pick up intel. And even our friends oftentimes do play little espionage games with us, and we do that with them as well. We got caught. I'm sure you remember that big kerfuffle a few years ago with Germany finding out that we were kind of listening in on some of their phone calls. But when I was at sea, I actually experienced a situation where personally I had my security clearance as a secret security clearance, as most surface warfare officers do, and but I take that very, very, very seriously because I understand that the information that we have can affect the guys who are at the tip of the spear. And so one day we had foreign nationals on board who were training with us, and a secret document was left open on the bridge when I took command as officer of the deck. I immediately took that secret document. I immediately went to the captain of the ship. I reported it as we were expected to report. I knew exactly who was the individual who was responsible of that, and he lost his place. He was fired. He was fired on board ship. And the fact is that there is no room. None of the foreign nationals saw that information, but just for the fact that we had them on board ship, and we had a secure document that was on display in an open area. There's no play. There's no play, and he lost his job. So the fact that the head of the State Department had real-time sat images that were on her unsecured server, that she had someone who was a foreign national who wasn't even in the country, I believe, for very long, actually she was working for her as a housekeeper, taking secure documents, TSSCI, like some of the highest level documents from a printer that was unclassified. And now it comes out to say, oh, Barack Obama, our POTUS, had knowledge of this. I mean, what do we do in this situation? Do we know how many people were killed? That's my question. I'm sorry, but screw the IG report. When it comes to real-time information, do we have people who were burned? Do we have assets who were killed for this? That is my question. And by the way, again, like I said in our last show, intent has no place here. They don't. It doesn't matter, Comey. Intent has no place here when it comes to if you did it. I don't care if you intended to do it or not, and it's pretty obvious that you intended to set up your own, non-existing secret server in your house. You were trying to hide something and you got caught, and it's time for you to pay.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We also know for a fact now, because of the IG report, that actually Hillary, her emails were intercepted by foreign actors, and we're not talking about Antonio Banderas and Javier Bardem. So we had she was actually in countries where the foreign actors were monitoring her email. So we'll see what happens on Wednesday with Peter Strzock. It's going to be, again, a lot more theater. But we're going to go to break right now. When we come back, we're going to talk about what's going on the border. Democrats are calling conservatives all kinds of names like Nazis and showing scenes that were actually taken in 2014 under Barack Obama. So stay tuned. When we come back to Power and Patriots, we're going to talk about what's going on the border and how Dems are actually politicizing the plight of these kids. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hey folks, this is Buzz Patterson. Welcome back to Power and Patriots, the only show on social media like it. I'm joined by my co-host Bree A, former naval officer, and Matt Dooley, former Army colonel, retired colonel. I'm former Air Force, and you're watching Power and Patriots on Your Voice America. So the last couple of weeks, I've seen some dramatic images coming from the border. The Democrats are making a big play to turn our immigration policies, President Trump's immigration policies, into a wedge issue. But my question to both me, Bree and Matt is, do they really care about the kids, or do they care about the narrative? Do they care about in November, or do they really care about what's best for America's national security interest and sovereignty? Matt, your take on what's happening on the border, and why does it matter? In terms of course, we're parents. We respect the fact that families should be kept together, but when you're crossing the border illegally, and about 90% of these kids are coming up with not their parents, but smugglers and other adults and coyotes. So, Matt, your take on what's going down on the border, and how should it go forward with President Trump in the elections in November?
Well, I think it's important to understand, Buzz. This is a problem that just didn't manifest last week
Right.
or last May. This is something that's been brewing for at least 30 plus years. The policy versus the law argument that you heard over the last week was an attempt to shift blame to a known point. What the left, what the media wanted to do, was smear Donald Trump as if he were making a policy decision. He's enforcing the law, a law that was initially in place by President Clinton, continued to be enforced by George W. Bush and Barack Obama. Some of the statistics that are relevant here to talk about why it's a security issue, why it matters if you're concerned about national sovereignty and borders. If you'll give me a minute to walk through these. These are stats from the General Accounting Office from 2011. Okay, so the Barack Obama administration. 3 million offenses committed by criminal aliens, of which 25,000 of those that year were homicides, 43,000 robberies, 70,000 sex crimes of one type or another, and 15,000 kidnappings. That it's not trivial. That doesn't mean that they're the only ones committing crimes. We talk about illegal aliens coming in and adding on top of what we already have in certain epidemics in inner cities. We're struggling to control with American citizens, trying to figure out solutions to add an additional layer of those who aren't even accountable to the laws of the United States because they're from someplace else. That's a big deal. That's what we're getting at when we talk about organizations like MS-13. This is not about race. This is not about ethnicity. This is not about where you come from. The only real estate that matters is the 6 inches in between your ears. What's going on up here? And if someone's coming in with the intent to cause harm, to raise hell, to run a gang, to hurt somebody, the President of the United States military, the Department of Justice, the Border Patrol, all have a responsibility to protect us. That's why it's an issue. It metastasized last week, interestingly enough, right about the time the IG report that we mentioned in the previous segment, as an attempt, cynically, I think, in my opinion, to steer the conversation away to something they thought they were going to get traction with.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think you said it off camera, Matt, that they were trying to create a Katrina moment for Trump with these images from the kids. And again, let's remind the viewers here that 90% of these kids are not with their parents. In fact, the Time magazine cover that showed President Trump kind of looming over this young girl crying, immigrant girl crying, was actually, she wasn't separated from her mom. Her mom brought her up here voluntarily, illegally, from El Salvador against her husband's wishes. So that was, again, the issue of the mainstream media trying to portray this as being some kind of huge crisis. And it is a crisis, but it's not a crisis that President Trump's doing. It's a crisis of the last 30 years being again, it started under my former boss, President Bill Clinton, in 1997 with the Flores consent decree, and it has not been changed. So the law is 20 days from the time that the parents are interdicted on the border to their children have to be separated from them. So that's the actual law, and President Trump is trying to change that. So Bree, going forward in terms of the humanitarian effect, how this is going to play in November, what are your thoughts in terms of how President Trump circles around this, and how, can he get Congress? The House will do something, I think, but how about the Senate? What can the Senate do?
Well, I mean, they make the laws. So have at it. If you want to change the laws, then do it. That's their job. President Trump, he enforces the laws on the books. One thing I want to say is back in 2016, there is a video of Hillary Clinton saying that these individuals need to be turned around and that this needs to be dealt with in the countries. Like, who's calling the countries who are allowing their people to leave to task on this? Like, who's calling out the humanitarian issues that these countries are having? I'm hearing no one in the mainstream media even addressing that. And I do want to call this out real quick, Buzz, because I think it's really important. On my end, most people know I'm a staunch Roman Catholic. To hear certain bishops down on the southern border claim that they're going to excommunicate ICE workers for doing their jobs, I would like to remind the American people watching here that back when the Syrian issue and the refugee issue was still a hot topic, if we remember that. Now, they're still out there, but no one really wants to talk about them anymore because we've got illegals who are happy to supersede the law and come in through a border where the poor individuals who are refugees are not able to be supported anymore. So that is something that you SJWs really are losing. But remember reminding to the American people that $91 million was funneled to the United States Catholic Council of Bishops, USCCB, by the Obama administration to push the idea of refugee resettlement. By the way, not Christian refugees, the Muslim refugees, the ones who were not able to be vetted, to push that from the pulpit. So when it comes to questioning, and there are many bishops right now who are questioning some of these individuals who are pushing this humanitarian humanism down on the border, I would say that be careful, because we're already finding some connections between certain donors like Hillary Clinton and George Soros, again trying to influence financially individuals in the Catholic Church. And Buzz, why is that important? Because you've got a huge demographic of voting Democrats in the Catholic Church. Doesn't mean that they believe or even live the faith that is presented to them. It means that they claim that they are Catholic and they vote, as Democrats, even if they're pro-death. And that was something that was found out by your boss when he wanted to see what real threat and unity the United States Catholics have in the voting box. So yeah, this is really important, and we should continue to investigate this, and we will.
Yeah, speaking along those lines also, we're going to go to break here in about a minute, about a minute and a half, Matt, but I'll give you a little bit of time to respond to this. I saw that one of the candidates for the presidency of Mexico is running on a very interesting platform. The platform is vote for me and then leave. He is advocating for a massive Mexican movement into the United States of America to really push our borders. So quickly, Matt, in about a minute, what's your take on where we go from here in terms of Mexico?
Yeah, it's a very interesting comment. It's essentially unfettered, unmitigated migration, encouraged by the president of Mexico, if he's able to become elected, is equivalent to invasion. It's a security issue. And I don't know if he's using hyperbole to offset Donald Trump because he thinks it's going to win him votes. But ultimately, a mandated, encouraged invasion across our borders is something that we'll have to address. It's not good policy to ignore it. When you look at how much money, in terms of millions of dollars, that Mexico gets in all of the other Central American countries south of them, whether it's El Salvador or Costa Rica or Nicaragua or Honduras, ultimately, when you add all that up, it's over $1 billion. What are we getting for our foreign aid if they're sending a quarter of their population north? Ultimately, we've got some decisions to make, and so do they.
Yeah, and I think Trump's already kind of fired that shot across the bow that he's not going to be paying, he's not going to be giving the aid to Mexico if they don't step up and tighten their borders and help us out a little bit. When we come back, folks, we're going to stay on the immigration issue. We're going to compare it now in terms of what's happening with all the leftists crying that Donald Trump, that people who vote for Trump are Nazis. And we're also going to compare it to the hypocrisy of the abortion debate. So stay tuned to Power and Patriots. We'll be right back. You're watching Power and Patriots. I'm Buzz Patterson. Stay tuned. Folks, welcome back to Power and Patriots. I'm Buzz Patterson. I'm joined by my co-hosts Bree Dail and Matt Dooley. This is the only show on social media like it. We're all military veterans, and we talk to you about military issues, national security issues, what's going on around the world that affects our security and our foreign relations. And again, this is the only show like it, and welcome again. So we're talking about the immigration issue, what's going on the border, and how a lot of the faux outrage from the left is centered on President Trump being a racist. People who voted for President Trump are all Nazis now. You've got people like Peter Fonda threatening to throw Barron Trump into a jail with a pedophile. He's also advocating for Department of Homeland Security, Kristen Nielsen, to be stripped naked on the square, circa Game of Thrones. And you've got people like Sarah Sanders, who can't go to eat in a restaurant in Virginia because of this hatred for Trump. But let's get back to the numbers. So currently, as we talk here, there are 12,000 children on the border that are being held in facilities for their welfare. 10,000 came up here without their parents. They were either sold to or have been human trafficked or sex trafficked or were paid coyotes to bring them up here. Roughly 2,500 are actually separated from their parents right now, but President Trump's executive order this week is going to reunite them in the very near future. But compare 2,000, 2,500 to the 650,000 abortions that take place in this country every single year. So for the left, from my position, the left to be claiming it's all about the kids, in reality, it's not all about the kids. Bree, what's your take on the discrepancy between the 2,000 kids and the number of children that are aborted every year in this country?
And based off of the last segment, again, those particular bishops that have in the Catholic Church who are really pushing this whole idea of illegal immigrants having American rights and should be able to come in and no borders and all of that. I'm really interested. When have they actually spoken up and actually demonstrated in front of an abortion clinic for the children who don't even have a voice yet? I mean, at least the kids on the border had a chance to get through. I mean, yeah, they may have been sex trafficked. Yeah, they may have had, their parents taken, sending them through with coyotes. But at least they were born. So at least their parents loved them enough for that. The children who are in the wound, who don't even have a voice, they're not being advocated with. And I should say, Buzz, I have a little bit of a teaser for you. We're going to get to see up close and personal what some measures are being done specifically to try to combat this epidemic of child killing in the United States, and digging out some of these horrendous so-called doctors who are running many of these abortion clinics. Some of them not even able to run them in states. They have to run them in the District of Columbia. So, we're digging right now, and there's going to be some reports coming out early this week, and I really hope that viewers look forward and stay tuned.
Yeah, we'll have the scoop right here on Your Voice America, folks. Bree's doing a great job there, and it's going to be, it's going to be amazing when you understand and are introduced to what's actually happening with those bishops. Matt, taking a step back here, as military officers, we understand the importance of sovereignty. And I don't think a lot of liberals actually get it in terms of why it's important for us not to have open borders, why it's important for us not to allow catch and release when we take these people into custody and then we give them a court date and let them go and they never show up. in the 2 or 3 years afterwards when their court dates due. So Matt, give us a little bit of a primer, if you can, about why sovereignty is important, and just how a republic and a democracy depends on it.
Well, we go all the way back to the Westphalian nation state, this idea that the nation has borders, and within those borders are your language, your culture, your laws. It's important for us to be able to control who comes into the country, where they come into the country, and how long they stay. For the same reason that you lock your doors at night. We're not saying that we don't like immigration, and that's part of the left's trick, is to conflate legal immigration with illegal immigration. To conflate those who arrive at a port of entry and apply for asylum, or who have a visa, with those who don't come in through ports of entry, who just cross over anywhere in the border. And those conditions, those security issues are wide open. And all we're asking as a sovereign nation is to be able to control the rate at which we flow people into and out of the country. In the end, it's what defines any other nation. Mexico has its own very strong immigration laws. Every other nation on this earth gets to control its borders. Why does America have to be the exception? Why does the gauge for compassion end up set by how many small children from other countries I allow, and not what I do with my own American children? A lot of us have people we care about in our own families. Why are they lesser? Why are veterans lesser? Why are Americans who are trying to get up and go to school in the morning suddenly lesser than people who are outside trying to come in uninvited and through points that are not ports of entry? It's a security issue, but compassion does not mean we have to practice cultural suicide.
Yes,
yeah, that's exactly right. And Bree, I'll get to you in a second. I just want to also point out that if it really was about the kids, there's 18 million, I believe, 18 million children right now in foster care that need to be adopted into families, and you're not seeing a lot of movement on that. And you're also not seeing a lot of movement on the part of the limousine liberals in Hollywood, who, if they really want to walk the walk and talk the talk, they'd be down there welcoming people into their homes. And be willing to sponsor those children. So there's this is all about November. There's no doubt in my mind, and I do believe it's going to backfire on the Democrats, because I think President Trump's approach is correct. And in November, if the Democrats are willing to run on open borders and raising taxes and siding with MS-13, so be it. I'll take those odds. So Bree, for your final thoughts as we go to break, we got about a minute and a half here. Final thoughts on terms of just the hypocrisy on the part of the left, and the fact that Obama and the Democrats were saying the exact opposite thing, or the exact same thing, in terms of tightening borders 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, when we consider, just like Matt had said about the Treaty of Westphalia, and even when people in the SJW left try to push the emotions or emote about how many of us come from immigrant families. Yes, my great grandparents came from Croatia and Ireland, and they came on a boat, and they went through a port of entry, and they were kept there. And one of the things that legal immigrants will say, there's the vast majority of legal immigrants who come to this country say they love the idea of vetting to come into the country. They were vetted, they had to wait, right. And they love the United States and the abilities that it affords. So the porous South is a major security concern. We know that we've had people coming from other countries other than South America, Central America, and Mexico come through that way because we just are not patrolling. It is a major security concern, and American people should be aware that sovereignty without, or a country without borders is one that will be dominated.
Yeah, and let's remind the viewers too what the actual law is. If you are coming here with an honest asylum claim and you go to a port of entry, you are not separated from your children. Okay, it's when you're coming across illegally. So the way that separations occur, if the authorities find out the child is falsely claiming to be the child's parent, or that the adult is falsely claiming to be the child's parent, is a threat to the child, or is placed in criminal proceedings. So if you go to a port of entry with a legitimate asylum claim, you're not going to be separated. If you come across the border and you're not the child's adult parent, or you are a threat to them, you're going to be separated. So folks, you're watching Power and Patriots. We're going to be right back, and we're going to talk about civil war. Are we in a civil war? I happen to think we are. When you see what's coming out of Hollywood, you can see what's happening in restaurants in Washington, D.C., and restaurants in Lexington, Virginia, with people who are working for President Donald Trump. I believe that the rhetoric has gotten out of control. The discourse is no longer honest and civil. We are in a civil war. We'll be right back. You're watching Power and Patriots. Please stay tuned. Folks, this is Buzz Patterson. You're watching Power and Patriots, the only show in social media like it. I'm your host. I'm joined by Bree A from the U.S. Navy, Matt Dooley from the U.S. Army. I'm the Air Force guy, and we talk about military issues, what's happening around the world, national security-wise, and how it affects your future, your safety. So this week alone, we've had Peter Fonda, a washed-up actor who was probably big back in the 1960s, tweeting out several threats to not only the First Family, Barron Trump, but also Department of Homeland Security Secretary Krista Nielsen. She was then drummed out of a restaurant that was also, ironically, leaked to the folks to protest her by a DOJ employee, a legal scribe. And then we also had, of course, Sarah Sanders being forced out of this restaurant in Virginia called the Red Hen because she was a Trump employee. So I believe the rhetoric has gone beyond the pale. I think we are now faced with, when you characterize a group of people, you characterize every single Trump voter, as Donnie Deutsch said in MSNBC this week, as a Nazi, you are creating an environment where threats are going to happen and violence is going to happen. Somebody's going to get hurt. Matt, your take on what's happening in terms of the discourse, the dialogue, and where it's headed?
Yeah, Buzz, I think that the death of civilization is the death of civility, and that's what we're seeing here.
Right.
Reasonable people could otherwise disagree. There was a time in the not-so-distant past that I remember that Democrats and Republicans and independents and those who are still trying to figure out where they were on the political aisle could reasonably disagree and share a beer over an argument, and that was not a big deal.
Right.
I don't see much of that anymore. And what we're seeing is the threats of violence, the refusal to listen to one another, and because of the passions involved and the stakes that are involved, we're reaching a boiling point that if we're not too careful, we saw this between the youth with Antifa in the very beginning of Donald Trump's administration.
Yep.
What we're seeing now is more and more people being pulled into that same sort of cauldron from different demographics. And here's the warning. When these kinds of civil wars break out, they burn white hot, like a magnesium fire, like a phosphorus fire, and they burn until both sides are exhausted. The kind of polyglot, multicultural society, strength in our diversity that makes up the core of the United States of America is the kind of society that would split along 1,000 different lines. I saw something similar in Bosnia. People who had lived next to each other for years, for decades, of different ethnicities, different cultures, different religions, suddenly went to war against one another, and it only stopped because they were simply exhausted. That's what I'm concerned about. When you talk about the kinds of people on the left and the rhetoric they're using going after people on the right, you have to look at the types of people on the right. You really want to keep the dialogue open, because of the types of people that when they have nothing left to say are the kinds of people you don't want to have nothing left to say.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And I got to say, I think it's incumbent upon us on the right. I know I try really, really hard to do this on my social media, and I get attacked and called all sorts of names. I just try not to engage that sort on that level. I try to keep it as logical and as polite of discourse as I possibly can. And I think I think social media is a good point. Let's talk about that for a second. I know that if you're a Twitter user or you have a Twitter account, the likelihood of you being a verified conservative Twitter holder is highly unlikely compared to the chances of a liberal or extremist. And I think it's important to notice that also, see, we know we had Roseanne lost her TV show because she made an ill thought through attempt at a joke. But we have Peter Fonda, who was essentially threatening the First Family. So Roseanne's show gets canceled. Peter Fonda still has a movie coming out this week, and he also still has his Twitter account. So I think there's a double standard here that I think that needs to be acknowledged. I'm not sure what we can do about it in the near term, but it's a real problem, and I think it makes getting this message out even more difficult, which is why Your Voice America exists, quite frankly. Bree, your thoughts on what's going on in terms of our Civil War and where we're headed?
I mean, you made a really good point right at the end, Buzz. Your Voice America exists because the free press that we thought we had in the mainstream media, they're no longer free. And why I say that is that we